The Lycan king abandoned his mate and his newborn pups. Years later, they accidentally meet again. The forest was quiet, yet heavy with the weight of unseen eyes. Mist curled around the twisted trees like ghostly fingers, hiding shadows that moved with a life of their own. Selene moved carefully, each step measured, her cloak brushing the damp earth. The wind whispered secrets through the branches, secrets she had long tried to forget, yet ones she could never fully escape. Years ago she had walked these woods with another, hand in hand, heart in heart. He had been the Lycan king, strong, commanding, and untouchably beautiful in his own dangerous way. And she had been his mate, chosen not merely by blood or bond, but by the rare alignment of hearts in a world ruled by power, curses, and fear. The memory was sharp, like ice in her chest. She could still see him standing at the edge of the throne room, golden hair catching the torchlight, eyes dark with a storm she had never understood. And then, the betrayal. He had abandoned her and their newborn pups, leaving them to the mercy of a world that could not forgive weakness. He had said it was for survival. He had said it was necessary. But to Selene, it had been simple. He had chosen duty over love, the crown over family. Since that day, she had raised their children alone. Her pups, innocent and strong in ways even she had not imagined, were the center of her world. They were unaware of the kingly blood running through their veins, unaware of the weight of their father's legacy, but they were alive. They laughed in the mornings, hiding the sharp edges of fear and loss beneath the soft melodies of youth. Selene had become something more than just a mother. She had become a protector, a strategist, and a silent force of magic. Powers she had once relied on only to survive the loneliness of the woods had grown sharper, more precise. The forests around her had become a sanctuary, a world separate from the cruelty of kingdoms and crowns. And yet, despite her strength, the shadow of the Lycan king's abandonment lingered, a dull ache beneath her ribs. The mist thickened and the distant howl of a wolf broke through the stillness. Selene froze, her breath catching. Wolves were common in these woods, but there was something different about this sound, ancient, commanding, impossible to ignore. She stepped back, eyes narrowing, heart quickening. It was not just any wolf, it was him. She knew the growl, the low rumble that spoke of power, pain, and memory. Her pups played nearby, unaware of the approaching storm. She called them closer, wrapping her cloak around her shoulders, her hand resting protectively on their heads. "Stay close," she whispered, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Branches creaked, the mist twisted, and then from the shadows he emerged. The Lycan king. Taller than she remembered, broader, his aura radiating the same raw, dangerous energy that had first drawn her to him. His eyes, a stormy mix of gold and shadow, met hers. And in that moment, time fractured. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time and the last at once. There was no greeting, no hesitation, only the pull of the past, a tether that had never truly broken. His gaze drifted to the children, now older, faces filled with curiosity and wonder. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Regret, disbelief, something deeper than he had ever allowed himself to feel. "Selene," his voice was low, rough with emotion, but it carried the weight of years spent apart, of battles fought alone, of nights haunted by the memory of what he had left behind. She held herself still, her heart a storm of anger, fear, and something she refused to name. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, but her voice trembled despite her efforts. "You left us, you left me. You have no right to—" "I know," he interrupted, his tone heavy with sorrow. "I made a mistake that has haunted me every day since. I thought I was protecting you, protecting them, but I was wrong." Selene's lips pressed into a thin line. She wanted to believe him, to forgive, but the pain was fresh, wrapped around her like the mist itself. "Words are not enough," she said. "You left when we needed you most. Do you think your return can undo that?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he took a slow step forward, his presence commanding yet cautious. The forest seemed to react to him, shadows bending, winds whispering, as if nature itself recognized the king's power and sorrow. He reached out, but Selene stepped back, keeping her children safely between them. "I have tried to find a way back," he said finally. "I have faced enemies, lost lands, and carried a crown that felt heavier every day because you were not by my side. But this, seeing you now, I cannot leave again. I cannot lose you and them a second time." The pups, sensing the tension, edged closer to Selene. They did not speak, but their eyes, wide and trusting, held questions. Who was this stranger with the familiar face? Why did his presence make their mother's hands tremble? Selene's heart ached as she looked at the man before her. He had abandoned them, yes, but the man standing there was not the same as the one who had fled years ago. Time had changed him, carved lines of regret into his face, tempered his arrogance, and deepened the storm in his eyes. She could feel it, the weight of his suffering, the echo of a man who had lost more than he had ever admitted. Selene began, but stopped. Words failed her. How could she explain years of loneliness, nights spent wondering if he would ever return, the constant fear for her children, the magic she had had to master alone just to survive? There were no words strong enough. A sudden rustle in the underbrush snapped her attention back to the present. The forest was alive, watching, waiting. Selene instinctively moved behind her pups, ready to defend them with everything she had. But it was only a deer, startled by their arrival. The tension remained, thick as the mist, unresolved. The Lycan king's gaze softened as he watched her. "I cannot change the past," he said quietly, "but I can try to protect what is mine now. Let me prove it to you, to them." Selene's eyes narrowed. "And if I say no?" "Then I will leave," he said without hesitation. "But I fear I cannot, I will not." The forest seemed to exhale. Mist curled around them, the trees standing tall like silent sentinels. In that moment, both of them understood the fragile truth. Fate had brought them together again, whether they wanted it or not. The past would not be denied, but perhaps the future could still be rewritten. Selene's hand brushed the pendant around her neck, a gift from him long ago, a symbol of love and trust now fractured. She remembered the warmth of his hands, the feel of his voice in the quiet of the night, the dreams they had shared of a family whole and unbroken. Those dreams had seemed impossible once, but now, standing before him, the possibility shimmered faintly, fragile as a flame in the mist. The Lycan king, sensing the unspoken connection, took another careful step forward. "I left," he admitted, voice breaking slightly. "I abandoned you all, and I cannot undo that. But if you will let me, I will stay. I will protect you. I will fight for you, not as a king of lands, but as your mate and as their father." Selene's heart thundered. Her anger warred with her longing. Her fear battled with the deep, unextinguished love she had carried for him through the years. Her children looked up at him, curiosity and hope shining in their eyes, innocence untainted by betrayal, yet sensing the weight of the moment. Before Selene could respond, a low, unfamiliar growl echoed through the trees. Not the king's, not the wolves', something darker, more sinister. The air shifted and the mist thickened. Shadows moved where no shadows should be, and a chill ran through the forest. The king's eyes sharpened, instincts flaring. "Stay behind me," he warned, moving in front of Selene and the pups, his form shifting slightly, the power of his Lycan nature radiating in protective strength. Selene gripped her children's hands, heart racing, as the forest itself seemed to come alive with unseen threats. For the first time in years, she realized that the world had changed, and perhaps the king's return was only the beginning of trials they had yet to face. And then, from the depths of the mist, a figure emerged, tall, shadowed, and impossibly ancient. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, its presence pulsing with a dark power that made the forest tremble. Selene's breath caught. Her children clung to her. And the Lycan king, standing tall and fierce, let out a roar that shook the very earth, announcing that he would not abandon them again. The encounter, long foretold in whispers and memories, had begun. The past and present collided, and the shadows of betrayal and loss stretched long into the night. The family they were, broken, scarred, and yet unyielding, stood together, ready to face whatever darkness came next. But even in that moment of unity, Selene knew one truth. The shadow before them was only the beginning. And the forest waited, silent, hungry, and patient. The shadow in the forest moved with an unnatural grace. Its form shifted like smoke, blending with the mist as if the world itself conspired to hide it. Selene's heart pounded in her chest, but she did not move. She would not let fear control her. Her pups huddled close, eyes wide, trusting her completely. The Lycan king's form loomed before her, protective, towering, and dangerous. He flexed his claws unconsciously, his Lycan nature sensing the dark presence. "Stay behind me," he growled, low and commanding. "Whatever this is, it will not touch you." Selene swallowed, her own magic stirring beneath her skin, ancient and quiet, like a river waiting to surge. She felt the bond to her children, their innocence, and the past that had never truly left her. She stepped slightly forward, feeling both fear and the pull of the king beside her. Despite years of absence, he was still the force of nature she had once loved, the storm she could not ignore. The shadow coalesced into a tall figure with glowing eyes, spectral and terrifying. Its voice, when it spoke, was like wind through dead trees, whispering truths and lies all at once. The king returns to claim what he left, but can he protect what he abandoned? The king's growl deepened, reverberating through the forest. "I left to protect them," he said firmly, though the words carried the weight of regret. "I was a coward, yes, but I will not fail them again. Not now." Selene's pulse quickened. She could feel the tension crackling between them, years of pain, longing, and unspoken words. The shadow advanced, and the mist seemed to thicken, curling around the king and Selene like a living thing. He shifted slightly, protective, powerful, radiating an aura that both comforted and alarmed her. "Run," Selene whispered to her children, but they did not move. Instead, they clung to her, their small hands gripping hers, faces pale but determined. Somehow, even in their youth, they knew this was a moment beyond ordinary fear. The shadow struck first, a tendril of darkness lunging at them. The king reacted instantly, catching it midair with his clawed hand. His strength was immense, a mixture of raw muscle and Lycan magic that pulsed beneath his skin. He roared, and the sound echoed across the forest, a declaration that he would not abandon them, no matter what. Selene's magic flared as well. She raised her hands, calling upon the energy she had cultivated in years of solitude. The air shimmered, small motes of light coalescing into protective wards around the children. The shadow hissed, recoiling from the power of her resolve. The battle was swift, chaotic, yet beautiful in its intensity. The king moved with a deadly grace, his claws striking, his form shifting seamlessly between man and Lycan. Selene's magic intertwined with his strength, creating a protective shield that glowed faintly in the dim forest light. The pups watched, wide-eyed, feeling both terror and awe. Finally, the shadow retreated, dissolving into the mist as if it had never existed. The forest fell silent once more, the only sound the ragged breathing of the king and Selene. "We are not safe," he said quietly, lowering his form to a human stance. His golden eyes softened as he looked at Selene, pain and longing etched across his face. "This was no random attack. It is connected to the curse, the one I failed to confront years ago." Selene exhaled slowly, her hands trembling. "I have feared this day," she admitted, "but I did not expect you to return, not like this, not after all these years." He took a cautious step closer, the forest between them charged with an unspoken electricity. "I did not return for glory," he said. "I returned because I could not ignore what I left behind. I abandoned you and them. I will not make the same mistake again." The children, sensing the tension, stepped slightly forward. The eldest pup, a girl with bright amber eyes, spoke first. "Father." The word was simple, innocent, yet heavy with implication. The king's eyes widened, and for the first time the weight of his absence hit him fully. He had left them as infants, trusting that survival alone would protect them. But here they were, alive, growing, stronger than he had imagined. He felt both joy and guilt in equal measure. "Yes, I am your father," he said softly, kneeling slightly to meet their gaze. "I should have been here, but I will stay now, I swear it." Selene watched, a storm of emotions crossing her face. Love, anger, fear, and longing warred in her heart. She wanted to believe him, to accept this second chance, but the memory of abandonment was too strong, too deep to simply erase. "It is not that simple," she whispered. "Years of survival, of fear, of protecting them alone, you cannot undo what has passed." The king nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I know," he said quietly, "and I do not ask for forgiveness yet. I only ask for the chance to prove myself to you, to them." The pups moved closer to Selene, yet their curiosity about the man who had returned was undeniable. They could sense his strength, his sorrow, and the unspoken bond that connected them across the years. Selene's gaze softened slightly as she watched them. Perhaps the children could see what she struggled to admit. The man before her was not the same one who had fled, and perhaps, in time, he could earn back what he had lost. But the forest was not silent for long. The same unnatural wind swept through the trees again, carrying a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The past cannot be ignored, nor can the bloodline be left unguarded. The king's posture tensed. "It knows our bond," he said, eyes narrowing. "The curse, it has found us." Selene's magic flared instinctively, small sparks of light dancing across her hands. "Then we must fight it together," she said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded. "Not as enemies, but as a family." The king looked at her, seeing both strength and vulnerability and a flicker of hope. He stepped fully into human form, extending a hand toward her. "Then let us face it together." For a long moment, Selene hesitated, the weight of trust heavy on her shoulders. She had survived alone for years, but perhaps, just perhaps, they could overcome this together. She placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth, the strength, and the unspoken promise of protection. The pups, sensing the alliance, gathered around them, their small hands touching the king's legs, their eyes wide with wonder. For the first time in years, the family felt whole, if only for a fleeting moment. Suddenly, a shriek cut through the forest, sharp and unnatural. Shadows twisted in the mist, forming shapes that were neither fully solid nor entirely spectral. The king roared, shifting partially into his Lycan form, claws extended, eyes glowing. Selene raised her hands, weaving protective wards with precision, her power surging in harmony with his strength. The battle was imminent, and yet, in that moment, a fragile truth settled between them. They could survive this together. They had survived years of pain, separation, and betrayal. Now, they faced a threat that required unity, courage, and trust. The shadow moved closer, and the forest seemed to darken, swallowing light and hope alike. The king growled, stepping protectively in front of Selene and the children. "Stay close to me," he commanded. "I will not let it harm you." Selene nodded, her hands glowing with magic. "And I will not let it harm them," she said. "We face this together, all of us." The shadow lunged, faster than thought, and the king met it head-on, claws slicing through the mist. Selene's magic flared, a shield of shimmering light enveloping the pups. The clash of darkness and light echoed through the trees, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Time seemed suspended. The king's growls mingled with Selene's chants, and the pups watched, wide-eyed, as their parents fought side by side, united by blood, love, and the unspoken promise that nothing would separate them again. But even as the shadow recoiled, dissolving slightly, Selene felt a cold shiver run down her spine. This was only the beginning. The darkness they faced was older than memory, stronger than any single power, and it had been waiting for this reunion. The king, panting but resolute, looked at Selene. "This was no ordinary shadow," he said, his voice grim. "It knows us. It knows what we mean to each other, and it will not stop until it has tested every bond we hold dear." Selene tightened her grip on the children's hands, her eyes meeting the king's. "Then we fight," she said quietly. "Together, we will survive and we will protect them." The mist swirled, thickening as the shadow retreated into the forest. Its glowing eyes lingered, watching, waiting. The family, reunited though wary, stood together, hearts beating in unison, ready for what was to come. And deep in the woods, the whisper returned. The Lycan king cannot abandon his past, nor the children he left behind. Fate has returned them to one another, but the trial has only begun. The night had deepened into a velvet darkness, the mist now thick and curling around the trunks of ancient trees. Selene stood silently, her hands glowing faintly with the magic she had spent years mastering. Her children huddled close, their small bodies trembling, yet their eyes showed both fear and courage. Even in their youth, they sensed the weight of what was happening, that their family, fractured and scarred, was finally being tested by forces far older and darker than themselves. The Lycan king stood a few steps in front of her, shifting slightly between human and Lycan form. His golden eyes glimmered in the darkness, reflecting both determination and remorse. He had faced countless battles, but none had tested him as this one did. Not armies, not treacherous allies, not the very storms of the wild. This was a battle of heart, of trust, and of redemption. "The shadow was only the beginning," he said quietly, his voice steady but carrying the weight of years lost. "Whatever curse haunts this forest, it knows our weaknesses. It knows the fear we have carried since the day I left you." Selene's eyes narrowed. "And yet you returned," she said softly, the words carrying both accusation and hope. "You risked everything, including your life. Why?" The king lowered his head slightly, shadows of guilt crossing his features. "Because leaving you and them was my greatest mistake," he admitted. "Every night since I have carried that regret. Every howl of the wind, every shadow in the woods, it reminded me of what I lost. I cannot take back the past, but I can fight for the future." Selene's heart ached. His words were sincere, each syllable steeped in the pain of years gone by. Yet the memory of abandonment was still fresh. She had spent nights alone, fearful for her children, wondering if the man she loved would ever return. "It is not easy to forgive," she said quietly. "Not after everything. Do you think it will be enough to simply show up now?" The king's gaze softened, eyes glimmering with an emotion she almost dared to hope for, vulnerability. "No," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I know it will not. Words cannot undo the years, but actions, perhaps actions can." The forest trembled suddenly, as though acknowledging the truth in his words. From the darkness, shadows emerged once more, ethereal, twisting, and alive with malevolent energy. They moved like serpents, reaching toward the family, seeking to ensnare them in fear and chaos. The king shifted fully into Lycan form, claws extended, body radiating raw power. He moved forward, a protective shield between Selene, the children, and the advancing shadows. "Stay close to me," he commanded, a growl rumbling deep in his chest. "I will not let anything harm you." Selene's magic flared in response. Energy danced around her fingertips, forming a barrier of shimmering light. The combination of their powers, the king's strength and her magic, created a force that pushed back the shadows, momentarily holding them at bay. The forest echoed with the clash, the air thick with tension and the smell of ozone from Selene's wards. For the first time in years, they fought together, not as separated hearts, not as a broken bond, but as a family united by both blood and choice. The children watched in awe, their small hands clutching at Selene's cloak, their eyes reflecting wonder and hope. Somehow, even in the midst of danger, they understood that this moment was a turning point. The reunion was not just emotional, it was a fight for survival and redemption. After a tense battle that seemed to stretch the night itself, the shadows recoiled, dissolving into the mist. The forest quieted, though the tension remained like an undercurrent. Seleni's chest heaved, her energy dimming slightly from the exertion. The king returned to human form, kneeling to her level, his expression a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and longing. "You are stronger than I imagined," he said softly, his hand reaching out but stopping just short of touching hers. "And your children, they are remarkable." Selene allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "They are strong because they had no choice," she said quietly. "I have done everything to keep them alive, even when I had nothing left myself." The king's eyes glimmered with admiration and sorrow. "And yet I was not there to help. I failed you, failed them, but I am here now, and I will not fail again." For a moment silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken words. The mist swirled around them, the trees standing as silent witnesses. Selene's gaze softened, though her pride and caution still held her back. The pain of the past was not easily erased, but the possibility of redemption flickered like a fragile flame. Suddenly, the eldest pup stepped forward, small hands gripping the king's cloak. "Father, will you protect us?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The king looked down, golden eyes meeting hers. A flicker of warmth crossed his stern features. "Yes," he said softly, "I will protect you, always." Selene's heart ached at the exchange. The innocence of their children, their trust, and their need for him stirred something deep within her. She realized that forgiveness was not something she could demand or rush. It would come slowly, through shared trials and unwavering action. The forest seemed to sense the fragile peace. For a moment the mist parted, revealing a narrow path lined with ancient stones. It was a way forward, though fraught with danger. The king and Selene both understood that this path was more than physical. It was symbolic of their journey together, one that would demand trust, courage, and the willingness to confront the past. "Come," the king said, extending a hand toward Selene. "We must move forward. The shadows will return stronger and more relentless, and the curse, it is not finished with us yet." Selene hesitated only for a moment, then placed her hand in his. Together they moved along the path, the children following close behind. Each step carried both hope and fear, the weight of the past pressing against the promise of the future. As they walked, the king spoke quietly, his voice low and thoughtful. "I have changed," he admitted. "The years of ruling, of facing enemies, and of living without you, they have hardened me, yes, but they have also taught me what truly matters. I cannot undo my absence, but I can ensure that nothing threatens this family again." Selene listened, her heart torn between anger and longing. She wanted to believe him, to trust that this was not just another illusion, another fleeting promise. But she also knew that action spoke louder than words. She would watch him, test him, and see if the man who abandoned them could truly become the protector he now claimed to be. The path led them to a clearing where the mist hung thick, and the moonlight barely pierced through. Ancient runes glowed faintly on the stones, a subtle warning of the power that lingered here. The king paused, senses alert. "The curse is strongest here," he said. "It knows our bond, our fears, and it will strike where we are weakest." Selene nodded, summoning her courage. "Then we face it," she said firmly, "together." The children stood close, small hands intertwined with theirs. The eldest spoke again, her voice steady despite the tension. "We are not afraid," she said, "because we have each other." The king's chest tightened with emotion. He knelt slightly, bringing himself to their level. "And I will never leave you again," he promised. "I swear it by everything I am and everything I have lost." Selene felt a lump rise in her throat. The words were sincere, but the true test was yet to come. The curse, the shadows, the forces that had haunted them for years, they were not finished. And this time the trials would test not only their strength, but their hearts, their trust, and their ability to forgive. A sudden chill swept through the clearing and the mist thickened once more. From its depths a shape emerged, a figure taller and darker than before, eyes glowing with ancient, malevolent light. Its presence pulsed with power, older than memory, hungering for chaos and fear. The king rose to full height, claws extending, muscles tensed, aura radiating raw strength. "Stay behind me," he commanded, voice deep and unwavering. "No harm will come to you while I stand." Seleni's magic flared, surrounding the children in a shimmering cocoon of protective light. "And I will stand with you," she said, her voice steady, the years of solitude and hardship giving her resolve. "We face this together." The shadow's eyes glowed brighter, and the mist around it writhed like living darkness. The forest seemed to hold its breath as the family prepared for the encounter that would test every bond, every trust, and every ounce of courage they possessed. The king glanced at Selene, and for a fleeting moment the years of pain and separation seemed to melt away. In that gaze there was forgiveness, not complete, not yet, but the first fragile step toward healing. And as the shadow advanced, the king and Selene stood side by side, ready to confront the darkness, protect their children, and reclaim the family that had been torn apart so long ago. The trial had begun. The forest trembled under the weight of unseen power. Mist swirled thickly around the ancient trees, shadows twisting like living tendrils. The Lycan king and Selene stood side by side, the children huddled close to them, their small hands gripping theirs tightly. Every nerve in Selene's body was on edge, yet she felt something she had not felt in years: hope. The shadowy figure before them pulsed with dark energy, its glowing eyes fixated on the family as if measuring their worth. Its voice, like wind through hollow stone, echoed through the clearing. "You have returned, but can your bond withstand the trials? Can your hearts survive what must be faced?" The king growled low in his throat, the sound vibrating through the earth. "We will face it," he said firmly, golden eyes glowing with resolve. "Together, no darkness can break us while we stand as one." Selene stepped forward, her magic flaring around her hands, weaving a shield of light that shimmered faintly in the mist. "We are not afraid," she said, voice strong despite the fear that gripped her chest. "We are a family, and nothing can harm us if we face it together." The shadow hissed, moving faster than thought, and lunged toward the family. The king reacted instantly, shifting fully into his Lycan form. His claws struck the shadow, tearing through the darkness, and his roar echoed like thunder through the trees. Selene's magic intertwined with his strength, creating a protective barrier that pulsed with energy. The pups watched, eyes wide with awe, their small hearts pounding with both fear and wonder. The battle was relentless. Every strike of the king, every burst of Selene's magic, seemed to be answered by the shadow with greater force. Yet as they fought, something remarkable happened. The power of their bond, the love they shared for their children and each other, strengthened their defenses. The shadows recoiled not just from their strength, but from the unity that radiated between them. The eldest pup, standing slightly apart, raised her small hands as if instinctively drawing on her mother's magic. A faint glow surrounded her, and for a moment the shadow faltered, hissed, and retreated slightly. The king's eyes widened with surprise and pride. "It seems our children carry more than innocence," he said quietly. "They carry hope and perhaps power of their own." Selene nodded, a mixture of pride and relief washing over her. "They have always been stronger than I realized," she admitted. "Perhaps stronger than even their father expected." The shadow reformed, more menacing than before. Its tendrils lashed out, seeking to envelop them, to separate them, to test their resolve. The king leapt forward, claws striking with precision, while Selene's magic flared in intricate patterns, weaving a protective web around the family. The children huddled closer, their fear tempered by trust in their parents. For a long moment the forest seemed suspended in time, the clash of dark and light echoing like a symphony of tension and power. And then the shadow spoke again, its voice dripping with ancient malice. The king abandoned his bloodline once. Can he rise to protect them now? Will the mate he left behind forgive his weakness? The king's chest tightened, guilt and rage surging together. He turned toward Selene, eyes burning with emotion. "I failed you once," he said, voice breaking slightly. "I cannot undo that, but I can fight for you now. I can protect you and our children, that is my promise." Selene's lips trembled, her heart torn between anger and longing. "Words are not enough," she said softly. "You must prove it, not just to me, but to yourself." The shadow surged, striking with a speed that made the air hiss. The king met it head-on, claws raking through the darkness. Selene chanted softly, her magic forming brilliant arcs of light that struck the tendrils, weakening them. The children, feeling the courage of their parents, added their small bursts of energy, illuminating the clearing with faint, glowing pulses. The shadow hissed in frustration, recoiling from the combined power. For the first time it faltered, giving the family a brief but precious opening. The king seized it, his claws tearing through the shadow's form, while Selene's magic surged, striking at its core. With a final, echoing scream, the darkness dissolved, leaving only mist swirling in the empty air. The forest was silent once more, the only sound their ragged breathing and the soft rustle of leaves. The danger had passed, but the weight of what had occurred lingered, heavy in their hearts. The king knelt beside Selene, his hand reaching for hers. "It is over," he whispered, voice raw with emotion. "We survived, together." Selene took his hand, feeling the warmth and strength in his touch. "Yes, together," she said softly, a small smile forming despite the exhaustion and fear. But the real trial was not just the shadow. It was us, finding each other again and trusting that we could be whole. The eldest pup stepped forward, looking between her mother and father. "We are whole," she said simply, her voice steady, "because we are together." The king's eyes glistened with unshed tears. He lowered himself fully to human form, kneeling beside them. "I have carried the pain of my absence for too long," he said quietly. "But now I understand what truly matters. You, them, our family, that is my crown, that is my kingdom." Selene's heart ached as she listened. The man before her, scarred by time and regret, was not the same man who had abandoned them. He had fought for redemption, for their safety, and for a future where they could all stand together. And in that moment, the fragile hope she had held for years bloomed into something stronger. The forest around them seemed to exhale, the mist lifting slightly, revealing the first rays of moonlight filtering through the trees. The night was quiet, the shadows dispersed, and the world felt momentarily safe. The king turned his gaze to the children, kneeling to meet their eyes. "I will never leave you again," he promised. "I will protect you, guide you, and love you as you deserve." The children smiled, small and tentative at first, then broader, their trust shining through. They had feared abandonment, but now they saw the strength and love in their father. The wounds of the past were not erased, but the path to healing had begun. Selene stood beside him, her hands still glowing faintly from her magic. She took a deep breath, feeling the bond that had once been broken begin to knit itself together again. "We are stronger than we were," she said softly, "and stronger together. Nothing can break this family now." The king nodded, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "I have learned what it means to love without hesitation," he admitted, "to protect without question, and to forgive even myself." For a long moment they stood in silence, the forest around them calm, the mist curling gently at their feet. The trials of the night had forged a bond renewed, tempered by pain, trust, and love. Then from the far edge of the clearing, a faint shimmer of light appeared, soft and gentle, almost like a promise. The king and Selene exchanged a glance, understanding without words. The darkness they had faced was only the beginning, but together they could face whatever came next. The eldest pup took a small step forward, hand in her mother's. "Will we always be together?" she asked, voice filled with hope. The The king bent down, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Always," he said firmly. "No matter what comes, we face it together. You are my children. Selene, you are my mate. And we are a family unbroken." Selene felt tears prick her eyes, the ache of years finally softening into relief. She looked at him, seeing the man who had once left them and now stood renewed, ready to reclaim the love and family he had abandoned. "Together," she whispered. The forest seemed to shimmer around them, the mist dissolving into gentle moonlight. The shadow had been vanquished, the curse faced, and the bonds of family restored. The Lycan king had returned not just as a ruler, but as a protector, a father, and a mate worthy of trust. And as they stood there united, the quiet truth lingered in the night. Darkness could rise again, shadows could threaten, and trials could come, but they would face everything as one. Their love, their courage, and their bond had been reforged in fire and mist. They were no longer broken. The forest was silent now, except for the soft rustle of leaves and the whisper of wind. For the first time in years, Selene allowed herself to hope, to believe in a future where their family could thrive, protected by love, trust, and the promise of redemption. The king's hand found hers, fingers entwining naturally. He looked down at their children, eyes soft with pride and devotion. "We have survived," he said, voice steady and full of promise, "and we will thrive together." Selene smiled, feeling the warmth of their reunion spread through her chest. "Yes," she said, "together always." And for the first time in a long time, the forest seemed at peace, as if acknowledging the triumph of love, trust, and redemption over darkness and loss. The trials of the past were behind them, and the path forward was bright, illuminated not by magic alone, but by the strength of a family reunited. The Lycan king had returned, not just to claim his crown, but to reclaim his heart, his mate, and his children. And together they would face whatever the future held. The night held its breath, and the family stood as one, stronger, united, and unbreakable.